Okay, so I guess recording is in progress. The meeting is being recorded. Sometimes it's being activated through Calendly. So, really great call today. Super excited to have my guest on, Dawn Ranieri. And Dawn, we were talking a little bit before we got started, and you have a whole host of things that you're really specialized and good at. And I know that it's really in the health and wellness space. And I know that we talked about helping people find their inner power, but you hit on something also that I found was really cool, and that is future self activation, which is just the whole concept of that, I think is really, really cool. But tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do and a little bit about how you got started into this space.
Oh boy, that whole getting started could be a whole podcast in itself. But my name is Dawn Ranieri from A Vibe Above. I've been doing this work now for 20 years in the coaching sector between life coaching and I started out with Reiki. But what got me started in this was something really bizarre. Deceased grandmother paid me a visit for a while after I got divorced. I had some crazy stuff going on in my house, didn't really understand what was going on. Um, Later found out that it was her. After I got divorced, I was hanging out with the wrong people, and um, so she kind of asked to come down and I was here for a higher purpose apparently, and I had to make sure that I was going to still be around for whatever that purpose still is. I can't 100% say what it was, but it was just a very interesting process of what I went through. And so I started looking into like the whole spirit and angel world. Reiki was one of the first things that I came across. And so I got attuned to Reiki, started dabbling in that a little bit. And um, to me, I was like, there's got to be more to this, right? Because bringing another energy in just didn't feel like that was it. So I started training on different types of energies, higher levels of Reiki, had some crazy things happen with me with where I would start to, and not here, like more intuitively be able to connect people with people that were still alive but who were supposed to be their mentors, and just a lot of things started happening with where at some point I even shut it down for a little bit because I wasn't really sure how to handle a lot of this that was happening, especially when I was doing these sessions.
Mhm.
um, but so I did a lot of on the side, and then when 2020 happened, I was getting visions before that on what I saw happening. And so I was trying to prepare people, and I started teaching people how to work with their own energy, and also taught about like numerology and astrology. And I'm not big in astrology, that could be a whole thing itself, but started bringing all of this other things to the forefront. And then that's where I was first introduced to technology. And the one thing, and I'm sure you've heard of it, was Healy, which I still use with clients today. And at first I was like, I don't want to do anything with technology, but I really meditated on it, and I heard like this was the future. Not just this, other technology coming out, as you well know. Um, and just everything kind of started from there. So I started combining coaching with the energy work and using this because this could get me into the subconscious aspect of people. And it made the invisible visible, because for with Reiki, it's hard to explain to someone when they can't see it. So this made that easier, where I could literally give them a PDF of like, this is your mother's energy. This is coming from this chakra, and this is coming from the subconscious versus what's conscious, and you may know. So this really helped to build more of a trust with my clients.
Mhm.
And then, of course, from there, I started getting into more technology and more different types of coaching. So it's kind of
How
where I
much,
am now.
yeah, how much did the Reiki kind of activate like that whole sense of energy flow. Like how is that? That seems to be many times when we interview people, they get into Reiki and then that helps them transition into other things, which to me actually become more metaphysical, like you were talking about earlier, where you're connecting people and talking to becoming more of a medium and talking
Hmm.
to spirit guides and different things. And I find that Reiki initially is like one of those channels that gets people very conscious on energy flow and kind of moves them into the realm where they start branching off into other things. How long ago was it that you got into Reiki, and what was your experience with it, and kind of how did you work with that when you first got going?
Yeah, so that's been almost 20 years. That was the first thing I got into when that whole thing with my grandmother wound up showing up for me. And the interesting thing is, I found it online. So I didn't go to someone close by. And I don't, back then, I don't know, it was probably more rare to find someone locally. And
Hmm.
I know when I first, read about it, kind of learned about it online, and I went through the attunement, I literally right away felt the energy in my hands. And so I started working on myself with it. And then trying to think, I mean, it was definitely what started it for me, but I wasn't getting myself out there at first. So then Facebook was just coming online back then. And I'm like, you know what, between like the full moon and the new moon, I was like, let me just put myself out there, like, hey, does anybody want a virtual Reiki healing? So I would start doing sessions. And it wasn't until I had someone say, hey, could you work on my dog? And they really didn't give me much information. They gave me, I think, a picture and the name of the dog, and that was it. And so this was something too, I wasn't doing in like a DM. This was something I was doing like in a comment on my thread. So anybody could see what was happening. And it was so bizarre because it was like the first time after doing this for a while where, yes, I was getting more attuned to that energy. And all of a sudden, my hearing went. So I'm sitting there doing this session, my hearing went, and then all of a sudden I had this massive pain in my neck, which eventually went away. So of course on there I'm saying, hey, wasn't sure what the symptoms were of the dog, but what was interesting is this is what came up for me. The dog was deaf, and her like 4 year old son was always pulling, trying to choke it, the dog. So I think that kind of opened it for me because then more people were like, "Oh my God, we've got to talk to you about different situations." And then at the same time, I was also looking at other types of Reiki because I still didn't feel totally connected with Usui Reiki, and I was finding like Yin Yang, which was a really big one for me. And that's where I started doing like events, and it was just like more with this energy, I could do sessions in like 10 minutes. I didn't have to go through like all the phases. It could be I could just have my hands like near your shoulders and do the whole session. And this is where the more I did this, the more names would start coming through. And I was always, taught to just blur it out, never feel like, that's just something weird. I would always ask a person, hey, do you know somebody with this name? And they would say, yeah, I haven't talked to this person. And it always seemed to be, I haven't talked to this person, but this person was really important in my life.
Hmm.
And it was, for me, it was like, I have a feeling like you're supposed to reconnect. This is someone that's supposed to be a mentor, someone for you to connect with. Um, so that was big for me. And then I think the more I did it, the more then things started getting a little eerie where either someone was deceased coming through and I just wasn't ready for that, or I had a situation where I was working with someone where I'm like, hey, your boyfriend's friend, please don't ever be alone with him by yourself, kind of thing. And I'm like, I started thinking, I'm like, I'm glad to be of help if this really, something, God forbid, ever happened. But I'm like, is this really what I want to be doing? Because I didn't really have a mentor at that point, really guiding me through this on what to do. But for what your question was, yes, I think, Usui Reiki or whatever type of energy you're working with, especially the Reiki systems, I really believe the more you do that, it's going to open more for you. The more you trust that process, the more you're allowing, because what happens is your consciousness is actually kind of going up, right? You're being more conscious so that you're actually hearing more. You just, you know, my I guess advice for anybody would be, if you do get into Reiki or any other type of energy system, just make sure you do have a mentor, a teacher that, after you're attuned, you're just not like going on your own. You really go through this because the more you do it, the more you can open other doors, and you just want to make sure that you have set those intentions, that this is the only energies I want to work with, and that you understand it fully so that you can move forward and do the best you can for people.
I love that. So you touched on a couple things. Now with Reiki, I always like to, we've talked to a lot of different people with Reiki, and Reiki, in my personal understanding, is sort of feeling and moving energy throughout the body. Is that
Mhm.
kind of an accurate assessment?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And usually we're using our hands. So
Hmm.
in most systems, we're kind of like that surrogate for the energy to be able
Hmm.
to use our hands. But then, yes, we're moving energy through the body, and being able to remove some of the negative energy that may be in there.
And you can kind of feel blockages and you can feel negative, positive. I think that,
Yes.
we've talked many times on the podcast about how emotions store themselves within the body. So trauma and other things can store in the spinal column or different parts or even in muscle tissue. And so you're kind of going through with your hands, feeling that, trying to release it and enhance that energy flow. Now, the thing that I find interesting is a lot of people that start with that start moving into a lot of what you were just touching on, which is higher states of consciousness now, where you're picking up intuitively a lot more information than what you might be sensing through the hands. And a lot of the people that I know with Reiki also have a lot of skills with sort of being a medium and basically being able to be somewhat psychic. And so I find it interesting that I think that, from what I'm seeing, is that Reiki is sort of an introductory level of sort of a physical sense of learning how to move energy. But as you start delving into that, it starts tuning you into a lot of other gifts and a lot of other abilities that you have. And then that starts really enhancing the amount of benefit that you can provide to the clients and the people that you're working with. Can you talk about maybe a little bit of the development of that? Now, I know some of that might have come naturally to you that you already had. You said that you were kind of tuning out some of that at some point, but now that you're kind of into 20 years of doing this and you're understanding a lot more, how does that affect, the ability for you to be able to tap in and see things on a much more psychic and spiritual level with your clients?
So for one, I just want to say we all have these abilities.
Hmm.
It's just, a lot of us have blocks, and it's not just even the traumas and everything that we may have gone through at a younger age. It's also, what are we putting in our body? What are we putting on our body? The EMF, 5G technology, everything that's around us that is causing these blocks. Um, for me, I don't know if I call myself psychic. I think my biggest gift is just that knowing, and most pretty much everybody has that one, but that's always been my strongest gift. And so, I've really learned to trust my gut. And there have been times though, and it's been interesting because it started more in 2019 before 2020 came around. It seemed to be in the fall I would start to get visions of something that was going to come, and it was always very general. So unless I meditated on it or really focused on it, I never knew what it meant. So there was times where I would have visions. um, I've never really wanted to get into the mediumship aspect of it, but I do believe that if you either focus on energy types like Reiki. I mean, I'm attuned to something else called sacred soul alignment, which is another type of energy work that I can clear 7 generations backwards and forwards just by running different types of codes that I would say. So even if you're into other things like that, I mean, even praying and just being present and doing meditation and mindfulness is still going to open us up, because the main thing is being more conscious. we're probably at like a 5, maybe if we're lucky, a 10% consciousness. And I'm learning this. I'm a founding member in something called Becoming Superhuman. So it's like there's this huge picture, but we get to see this little bit amount. So the more that we practice meditation and mindfulness and Reiki and all of these energy systems, and we're being quiet, we're quieting the mind, we're tuning out all of this background noise, we start to become more conscious and those gifts start to come in. But that also does mean taking care of your body, eating the right foods, doing the best you can about, maybe putting shungite or something on the back of your phone, keep trying to tune out the EMF 5G frequencies. And just what are you saying to yourself is one of the biggest things. If we're not clearing these emotions and that we're suppressing them for years, there's still a lot of things that we need to get out before we can really tune into that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And you were talking about clearing 7 generations forwards and backwards. Let's dig into that. That sounds extremely interesting. First of all, I think that the past life regression, there's a lot more of that being brought out there. I think a lot more people are starting to become more conscious of that. But I think also there's more people that are trying to help people dig back in and get into some of that. Talk a little bit about what that is about, and how you kind of work with those types of abilities.
Yeah, so I'm attuned to probably about 200 codes, and I'm at the point where I can also create my own codes. So I could be working with someone. Let's just say I had a client that she was kind of having a fallout with her daughter. And although I can't work on the daughter because I don't have her permission, I can work with the mother and say, all right, I'm going to run a relationship code with you. It's between you and her, but I'm working on you. So these codes are more, specific words that I'm saying that are coded, um, and that will start to clear whatever needs to be cleared on that relationship aspect that's holding them back. And so, like for that, the next day I got a call. Oh my God. She called me, came over, hugging, everything's good. I don't take credit for any of that stuff. For me, it's all right. Well, she was willing to work with me with this code. She's the reason that this worked. Codes could be about anything. They could be about health and wellness. They could be about, I could be working on the chakras, in a Reiki system, and I could run these codes on the different chakras. And it's just an acceleration of what gets cleared out. Now, I do work with some other things that I've done a little bit of past life, but I haven't really spent the time to really do a lot with that, except for my own stuff. Um, I know when it comes to past lives with me, I have probably been around the world probably more times than most normal human beings, and started out in things that were not human. So, and I haven't really done many regressions to find out a lot about my stuff because I've spent more time just really clearing what comes up in different ways. And there are certain things that people can do on their own. And, I teach like, muscle testing and just the body swaying and really connecting with your body and asking your body, all right, am I feeling this emotion today? Or what emotions am I feeling? And maybe having a pendulum and figuring out what these emotions are and trying to see, well, is this from this lifetime or is this from another lifetime? And seeing how far things go back and seeing where maybe you have cords connected with other people. And of course, some of that people can't clear on their own. But when you can see where something started, something originated in the body, and get to that root cause, and maybe just sit with that energy and get it out. There are certain things that we can do on our own that I think a lot of the world's still not educated on, and that's what I like to educate. And I know there's a lot of people out there that do educate, but then there's that more where yeah, there could be more of something stuck within us that kind of goes beyond where it is from another past life. And maybe you've got a court or a contract or some kind of agreement from either you made in another lifetime or somebody else cursed you with that you still need to go through in this lifetime or clear. So there's so much that so many different modalities and techniques that you could work with somebody on clearing this and going super deep.
It's so fascinating. So when you're talking about codes and 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 speaking these codes, are they typical words or are they a mixture of syllables or is it sound vibration that you're putting together? Like what for the people that are out there and even myself, what would you describe a code and is there something that you could just give as a brief example of what a code might be? Because I have talked to other people, and when they start getting into, well, sometimes I have other people that have called it light talk, where they're getting like a transmission and they're talking, but it's really just a mixture of symbols with hand gestures.
Right, light
And it,
language.
what was that?
The light language.
The light language. And then
Hmm.
I look at that and I find it incredibly fascinating. But to them, when they start getting into light language, they are literally channeling that verbiage or whatever it is that they're doing is literally being channeled through them. And as somebody that's, very well educated on, say, Vedic uh, things and mantras and different things like that, a lot of times that gets into various different types of sound vibration as well.
Hmm.
But how would you describe codes and where the origins of those come from? I think it's amazing that you can kind of create your own code so you can go into something and then create a code for that. I love the story about the mom and the daughter. And to me, when I'm listening to that, I feel like this is an energy cleanse. Like there's some like energy thing that's in between them that needs to be resolved and kind of balanced out.
Right.
But give us a little bit of insight on that and kind of what that is and how that works.
Yeah, so I did not start this modality. This is by Alicia Hartzell from Sacred Soul Alignments, and then she's also has Sacred Soul Lake Codes. So I think these came from Mount Shasta. They were her and another woman, and I'm gonna forget her name at the moment. But a lot of these came through kind of like Reiki. It was kind of like a download that started, and then every time she goes back, these codes start to form. But what goes into these codes is yes, it's the words, it's the sounds, it's a combination, and sometimes research. Because if it's a code for the body, let's just say the nervous system, you have to really understand what the nervous system does to put this code together before you start using it. So she's spent, and I don't even know when I got attuned to that. That was probably at least 5 years ago, if not longer. But there's a lot that go into these codes before you create them. Um, so for me, when I got attuned to like an advanced level, it was the same thing. It was kind of like, all right, here's the format of kind of like how three different ways you could put a code together. And for me, so sometimes it was taking something that she already had and adding other things to it, or it was more like, all right, like full moon, I did the full moon release. So it was like, all right, what does the full moon, what does all of that encompass? And then what other frequencies or solfeggio tones or whatever really would I like to see in this code that could benefit people if they're looking to release things at that time. Um, so and for her codes, it's more like in divine love and light, calling in the sacred soul alignment of love yourself fully is a code. So calling this in, Father, thank you. And it would run. And so I could do other codes. I could expand more on what that code is supposed to do for someone. And then it's bringing it through the whole entire body and grounding into the earth star chakra, um, Gaia, and the 12th dimensional grid system, and really grounding in there for that person. So it's more words. It's just kind of saying specific phrases and calling in the specific codes, no matter if it's for ourselves, for protection, for self love, for manifestation, relationships, for maybe like the nervous system or something that needs to heavy metal detox. It really depends on what you're looking to use that code for. That's going to be beneficial. And then it's just, yeah, it's just trusting that once you say it and you set that intention, that it's going to go out there and it's going to be used for what it needs to for that person.
So those are primarily based of just normal words that we might be familiar with. And
Hmm.
yeah, okay.
But there's a lot to that code. Um, it could have when she creates them, because I've seen some of them, and that's like in Divine Love and Light, that's like the short version of
Hmm.
something super long that could have, oh my God, a whole page of what this code in the background is really doing. So I
Hmm.
know those codes for her take a lot of time to really create. But we can just do this simple code and simple saying. And it's kind of like Reiki, where, if you either visualize or kind of do that symbol, it's kind of doing the same thing. It's getting that frequency out there, and doing what it needs to do for that, whatever that intention is that you're setting for it.
I think that the takeaway that I get from this is that I don't think people really understand the power of words, of just, and not even necessarily with the codes, but just the verbiage and the words that they use and the words that they bring up in conversation, whether good or bad, because I feel like words carry so much more power and meaning than we really give them credit for. And I find that as I become more conscious of that, I'm very careful about certain things that I will or will not say because abracadabra, speak it and it shall become your reality, which is technically sort of that translation. So, staying away from negative words, negative thoughts, and, projecting negative outcomes is something I've really become conscious of in the last few years. And I restructure the verbiage that I'm going to say if I'm describing very certain situations, knowing that words are extremely powerful. And I think that the codes are probably like a real hybrid version of condensing very powerful words into very specific purposes. And I find that that in itself is kind of its own science and specialty, if you will, because that, when you really start understanding how deep that can really turn into like a whole subset of knowledge and information that then in turn helps you with the other parts of, healing and whatever else that you do, but understanding the power of words
Mhm.
and then converting those into codes to really make them even more powerful to me kind of even taps into like ancient history where we're getting into mysticism and magic and all these different things. And so I love the fact that this is still, you know, introduced and still being used in modern society because as modern as we become in many ways technologically, I feel like there's a lot of our past on a spiritual level and with this type of knowledge that we've lost. And so, with a lot of the things that you're doing, not only are you service to others and helping others, but it's also the knowledge and the information that you're bringing back so that people can kind of understand their own power. And that part of it is actually really beautiful. One thing also that you spoke about that I've heard many times, and I want to dig back into this, is the chords and cord cutting, because that is another thing that I find with Reiki that Reiki people are very attuned to and very, very easily able to look at and understand. And I love the fact that you're talking about chords that you might have made as a soul contract, and then other chords that might have come just through your third dimensional reality of going through this lifetime that you might have picked up. Can you talk a little bit about chords, what they are, how they work, and how you can either cut them or at least understand them so that that frees you up a little bit more from your chosen path of life?
Sure. And it's interesting because I don't work with chords very often. I've learned different things through different mentors where I've even heard you can't really like cut the cord. But what I know about chords and what I've always focused on is, you and I now have a chord, right? It's any connection that we have at any time. It could be we could have just passed each other and just looked at each other. And there could be a simple little cord there, right? I could have wished you well in my head, or I could have been like, who is that? Whatever. And passed on some things to you just through my thoughts. And that goes back to your words. We don't need codes. Our words are those codes, in good and in bad. But um, but a lot of times the cords are stronger when we have those stronger relationships, the love-hate relationships. We cannot cut love cords, regardless of what their belief is. That is one thing that we can't cut. But we can loosen these cords, that are holding us back. And there are certain different ways that I've learned you could, ask Archangel Michael, if you believe in angels, to come and either cut the cords or, release those cords for you. I've also learned that just kind of visualizing that person and seeing them in front of you and just saying, it's time to release this. This has got to go. And just seeing a change in their demeanor and smiling and just nodding and knowing that that cord is gone, to me has always been a better way of doing it, where I feel like I'm in control and I feel like that other person is still kind of part of that regardless. Um, but there are so many different things out there. It really depends on what people follow, on where they see that cord cutting. But yeah, I mean, we have it with everybody pretty much. But the more that relationship is, the more toxic it is, or the more loving it is, there's a cord. We have cords to our kids. We have cords to pretty much everybody. At least that's how I've always been brought up to believe.
Yeah. So when you're doing a reading on somebody, are you able to pick up those chords?
Mm, not really.
Mhm.
I don't really tap into that, I guess, but sometimes I can feel, just by how people talk or their demeanor, if I'm, on a Zoom call, or if I'm in person with them, by their body language, if there's something going on with that person, but I don't really visually see anything.
But you can sense like there's something I feel like a relationship issue or a chord that's
Oh
coming
yeah.
from. Yeah, that's actually really fascinating. Well, I definitely want to move into now the part here where it's the future self activation. And I think that that is just absolutely super exciting. Tell me a little bit about that future self activation, what that is, what that entails, and how you work with people to become, I guess, what they would want to be their dream life, right? Or their
Hmm.
dream scenario for who they are. Talk a little bit about that and how that got started and what's involved with doing that type of a practice.
Sure. So for me, when I was working just in my regular coaching a while back, and this is probably, I want to say, a couple years ago, when I was working on like goals for a business, what really I really focused on for them was, hey, let's see what your goal is for your business. Like, where do you see that end result? And instead of going from, all right, that's my desire, where am I here and how can I get there? Let's go the opposite way. This is where you are. What would have been that next step that you have would have taken to get there? And then let's go backwards to where you are now. And that always seemed to be easier for someone to be able to get to that ideal. So that was one of the things I was doing. And then one of my teachers that I follow, that I got certified with life coaching, um, she came out with, I don't know, maybe it was a year ago. It may have been somewhere around there. Um, a future self life coach. So it was like an 8-week program. I saw it. I was like, oh yeah, this is so me. So I took that, and there was a lot in there that I just didn't know. And it was focused on, bringing like an 8-week. There was, oh my God, there was probably about 30 something things of paperwork. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to bring this into what I do the way this is. The information was wonderful, but I'm like, something was telling me do like a 6-week. And so I really, again, meditated on this and had my notebook out. And I'm like, using the information that I've learned in the certification and what I do, how do I want to create something that is specific to what I do using the tools that I use and create it so that people can walk away with not only seeing themselves as that future self person, no matter if it's 6 months from now, a year, 10 years, but that they can align themselves with that person now because it's got to be about the present. And, it took a little bit. And I just started jotting down just kind of how I wanted to see it. And my goal became, I wanted to first kind of give them a little taste of what that future self was going to be like. And then I wanted to make sure that whatever we were working on, no matter if it was a business goal, a relationship, manifestation, health and wellness, life purpose, whatever it was, that we really knew what those limitations and those blocks were that needed to be cleared so that we were going to be able to move forward easier, how to reframe it, um, how to then finally to fully embody yourself as that ideal future self,
Mhm.
how we would have the confidence to be that person every day and be in a place where we can manifest, and then being able to take that like action plan so that when they weren't with me anymore, that they could follow like a step by step every day to make sure that they're continuing to follow this and to be that person. So, and then, I looked at what other tools would I want to bring in. And at the time when I first started this, I was like, well, I definitely want Healy because that's perfect for doing the limitations and the blocks because I could run a subconscious scan and see and I'm usually pretty good. Like if I'm talking to someone, and I think most of us can do that, I can't maybe pick up my own subconscious beliefs all the time unless I'm really listening. But it's so easy when somebody else is talking to pick up stuff that they don't really understand.
Mhm.
But when I can use this tool on top of it and really scan into them, we're able to get so much farther. And then the frequencies will start to knock out wherever that block is in their body on top of what we're doing together. So that was something that was really important for me to get to bring into this, as well as doing, future self meditations and thank you letters. And I wanted to actually give them, because for me, and people always say to me, man, your prices are so cheap. I'm like, I want it to be valuable, but I want it to be able to be accessible for anybody. But also, how can I also give them the wow factor and just give more value? So, if someone needs that extra, if I see them really stuck in something while we're going through this, I'll create a meditation for them. I've started to add in, in the beginning, talking about their north and south nodes. Their south node is their lessons, their karmic that is about now. It's about this lifetime. What are they so that they have a better idea. We usually know what they are and we usually blow them off. But I think when people actually know, like, this is what was aligned when you were born, it kind
Mhm.
of gives you like that, ooh, maybe I should really kind of look at these things. And then our North Node, which is pretty much our life purpose, and kind of to see if what you're doing or what you're striving to do is aligned to what that is. So there are other things that I throw into this as well. Um, I've been doing this more with clients that I see in person, but it's something I can do virtual. And I'm also working right now on a workshop. I do sound healing and I do some other things where I have a local yoga center called Radiant Heart that a lot of times I'll do different workshops. So I've had people like, I can't do the 6 week program. Is there any, like, can you create a workshop? So I'm working on doing like a 2 day workshop because I can kind of condense all of that into
Mhm.
like 2 hours. Um, and I also want to create something specifically for kids for this because my passion is working with young adults. I have two young adult girls, and and I love working with kids. And I think the younger that we really teach a lot of this energetic work to, because they understand it, the more they're not going to have a lot of the same issues that we have. They're not going to be repressing a lot of these emotions that are blocking and causing illness and other things in their body. So there are goals that are coming up with this as well. But so that's kind of how this came to be. But if there's any questions you have specifically on what I'm doing in that, feel free to ask.
I would like to just get an idea of like some of the people that you work with on this. Like what are some of the clients and what are some of the dreams and goals that they have? Before you answer that, though, I do want to circle right back to what you just said about the young people, because I do find that these young people are so gifted that if we can help let them tap into these gifts, they also are able to develop them at a much younger age. I feel like there's a
Yes.
lot of young people that have these gifts that are kind of shoo-shooed away or say that's not possible or, I don't know about that. And they have them at a very young age and then they kind of bury them. And then at an older age, they recircle back and then say, I started doing this at a young age, but, I wasn't accepted then. So I want to just kind of throw that note out there. But as far as the clients that you're working with for the future self-activation, give us a little bit of insight about, is it, moms, is it the kids, is it, who are some of the clients and what are some of the goals and things that you do work with on that level?
So right now, all of my clients have been business owners.
Okay.
They've been either business owners that want to expand their business, or they have been ones that have either gotten out of something that they were in because it just wasn't aligned, and now they're looking to create their own business, and they don't want to just run into something. They really want to make sure that it is aligned to what their goals are. So me and my boyfriend actually have our own network group, and that's where a lot of my clients right now come from. And so everything is based more on them. And both of them are, anytime they're there, they're always raving about like everything. So I'm really big on, not saying much about my clients, but they're like, you can talk about us all day if you want. So one of them, he owns like a digital marketing company, and it was a franchise that he bought into. And you know something that he gave up what he was doing before to start this business, and of course wanted to succeed and bring his family into at some point, but he wanted to make sure that he was able to do this on his own. And one of the things was getting more clients. And a lot of times it's so hard when you're talking to, you have those cold calls
Hmm.
with clients, and how do you want to, what are you going to say, and because you want to see what that client really needs. You don't want it to be about, I just need a client, I need to make more money, right? And he's all about, I want to really help these people with their social media, their digital marketing, whatever it is. And I want to be the best at being able to communicate with them. And so he was one of the ones that I actually wound up making a meditation for. And it was all about having these calls. And it was like, all right, because we can always see like, oh my gosh, this client's happy. They're making money because, they use my services. But it's like, we want to go past that. What does their family life look like? Now that they're happy and they're making money because you helped them, they used your services. What does their family life look like now? Are they now have more time for their family? Is there less stress between husband and wife? Do they have time to go outside and play with their son or daughter, whatever? So it's like, look past that, look past that relationships. And this is what I created into this meditation. And again, I can make these things all day, but if my client doesn't listen to it and take this in, it's not going to do anything, right? So of course he was right on it. And in a week, he closed 3 sales. Um, my other client that I just had, she wasn't happy in the business that she was part of. She was one of the owners, and She wanted to look at something else and she had no idea what she wanted to do. She knew what she didn't want to do, but she had no idea what she wanted to do. And so that's what we focused more for her. Where were the areas that she could see herself happy, not just like, oh, I'll do this just because I need money. This is what I'm good at, so I'll just do it. What really lit her up?
Mhm.
And from there, she was able to create something that was so unique that nobody else is doing. That if she didn't take the time to do this, she may have just said, oh, I'll just do something similar to this right now until, I figure it out. So having this huge, incredible dream job come out of something that she created just through going through this and being able to see that part of herself, a year in advance was something that really helped her get to, where she's going to be now.
I love that. When I hear you talking about that, I'm a huge fan of Neville Goddard, and a lot of people that what the whole thing is live in the end, right? And I love the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you're bringing them to the future and then scripting it out. But the thing I find that most people are missing is doing the work, which is what I'm
Yes.
really feeling is what you're doing is you're scripting out and really making them do the work, which is I want the vision of what that's like. I want the vision of this is what my day is going to be like. I want to know what the ideal scenario is. You're scripting out and making them do the work to really manifest that reality. And I find that it's one thing to just say, oh, I want to be this. But when you really start breaking it down in detail, and especially when you start writing it down, that's when it really takes on a lot of power. And I would say that the other thing that I see you as is sort of a co-manifestation person, because when you have multiple people pushing for the same goal, the same reality, it's like a springboard. It pushes you into that reality much faster when you have somebody saying, "Yes, I see you as that Fortune 500 person that's running this company," and then you're talking back and forth in the present tense of something that's technically future, but then you get to the reality where future and present is all the same, and then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden you're living in it. But I feel like that's the piece that people are missing. That is the part where it's like, no, we're going to sit down and we're going to really script this out. And we're really going to start with the ideal scenario, the ideal, work day and what your real function and purpose is and what, like, and then presenting that as the present future and then co-manifesting that and really springboarding that in. I see that as having so much value and really, taking people through sort of a blueprint of what it really takes to manifest that reality.
Yeah. So I mean, even from day one, either if they're here, like in my office, or if, we're doing the virtual, I'm doing meditations with them as their eyes are closed. And there's a lot of times where they're filling out paperwork, when, they're right next to me, they get homework, they get a checklist. I mean, and the clients have gone through, I check on them every week. Hey, I mean, if I don't hear from them first, some of them will still send me stuff. Hey, look at my action plan for this week, which is great. And, but I'm always checking up. But yes, you have to. So that's why I love the way, and I'm glad I took the time to create it the way I did, because I want to be there when they're writing some of their letters, and being there as I can feel them fully getting into that future self. And one of the other important things, and I think this is where a lot of people understand this whole future self part is, and you said it too, it's all together. There's really no past or future. It's all together. We created the whole time thing. It's not linear. But when I'm able to say to someone, right now, how do you feel about your life, your health, whatever, right? Because right now, we are the future self of our past. And if you're not happy with some aspect of your life, well, you did something in that past that got you to this point. So, as the future self of the past, but also that present person getting to another part of your future, what better steps are you going to take now? And I teach people too that we're not we're not asking questions anymore from the past. And sometimes I'm in the future or the present. It's more like, what would my future self do? What's going to pull me forward? What emotions would that future self have right now that I should be feeling? So that we're always being in alignment of that. But I think when people understand that you are still that future self now, they're
Mhm.
just like, oh my gosh, like, yeah.
Yeah, at any moment, infinite miracles and infinite possibilities from the very present moment. I think that the biggest thing that I see in this day and age is that people are never in the present moment. They're either thinking about something in the past or they're projecting things that are outside of the present moment, but embracing that present moment and creating that future moment through the present. And what you said is the future becomes the present and it's all intertwined, it's all one thing. For anybody that's out there, I want to get your web address and we're going to put all that out there. But for anybody that's out there, could you give us possibly like three tips or three things that you would recommend to help bring out that inner power within or find the inner strength, inner power, and to manifest, that future dream reality? What would be just a few points of advice that you might give us or give people here watching today?
Yeah, I think one is try to try to set time on your phone, even if it's just one time a day or every hour, just to be present for a couple minutes, because that's going to help raise that consciousness. A couple minutes that you're not going to be all over the place thinking about work and everything else. Um, do a body scan. One of the things that I think is so important is for us to really be connected to our body. So we know what the body's trying to tell us, especially if there's something wrong or, we're trying to figure out the best things for us to eat. Just scan your body daily. What is it saying to you? And oh, third, let's see, just trust in what your gut's telling you. I mean, it's so easy for us to get all of this outside information from people or situations that are going on. But the most important person is you, and you have to really trust, what that feedback is. So, make sure you really feel that when you set that intention of just being present and asking yourself, is this right for me? Really listen to your body instead of what you're getting outside. I think it's so important. And the more we kind of be present, we really listen to ourselves, listen to our bodies, and just listen to what's going on inside of us, that starts that empowerment for us.
I love that. I think that, as I listen to you and I hear the story of the Reiki and all that, I feel like the number one skill that you really have and have developed is intuition
Hmm.
and listening to that inner voice and being very perceptive and being a little more still, a little more quiet and listening to those messages internally and externally. I think that, they're always coming to us and we all have the ability to perceive that, but there's so much noise and so much other stuff that can drown out that knowledge or that voice from within, that tuning more into that, I think is really a great way to kind of finish up our first call here today. So, so Dawn, anybody that's out there that's listening to this, that's as intrigued as I am, where do we find you and where is the best place to contact you?
Sure. So they can find me on my website, which is www.avibeabove. So it's AVIBEABOVE.com. You can reach out to me through there. I'm on all social media, but normally on Instagram, Facebook as a Vibe Above. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. They're probably the best ones for me.
That's awesome. It's been an absolutely fantastic call, and I'm really excited that we were able to get together. And I'm looking forward to future calls as well. And so, with that being said, thank you so much for your time today. Hang with me for just a
Thank
sec.
you.
I'll go ahead and the podcast, have a minute or two to hang out with you, and I'll look forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Sean.